Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Hope again, as always, you guys are staying safe and creative wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode where we're going to talk about creative stuff, art in general, and do that with another creative person sitting next to me. Another artist has jumped into the fray, someone that I've wanted to talk to for a while. It's always the case with most of these interviews where people are admired from afar, and then I try to lurk up as quick as I can and ask, do you want to come on the podcast? Because they're always extremely busy with their work, as they should be, because this industry is fast and furious at the best of times. So today we have an amazing guest on, someone that I've watched carve his own path for the last couple of years and really end up at a point now where I think he's at the crescendo of his career, somewhere where I think he's wanted to be for a while and somewhere I think he deserves to be, definitely, with the work he's put in. We're going to talk to Mr. James Cain today. Hi James, how are you doing?
Hello Gordon. Yes, I'm very, very well actually. I'm deep into my new projects, as we were talking about before the stream, and I'm enjoying it. I'm kind of it's an interesting kind of time to be doing ZBrush and working on these kind of large IPs that are from my childhood actually at the moment.
Yep. Yeah.
And so sometimes I'm again, we were discussing, I think I have to pinch myself a little bit to
remember that where you're here now, where you want to be. So for people who don't know, can you give a quick intro about who you are and what you do for the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I'm James Cain, and I am a digital sculptor. So I've been doing sort of sculpting. Well, I've been sculpting digitally since about 2013. Actually, 2013. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been sculpting away and had some very good successes early on in my career. Started off sculpting miniatures, and then worked my way up into sort of larger pieces. I've been working for XM Studios as an assistant art director for the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I've recently just joined Sideshow as art director and senior concept designer.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
and again, the thing of like, you know, we were talking about the kind of my transition into this career and being nearly in my 40s now, and oh god, I hate saying that out loud. It makes me cringe every time. But so you've been sculpting since 2013. So if we think about it, really, it's just over 10 years you've been doing this. Yeah. So were you going to school back in the day before 2013, or did you have a career before that as well, or how did you get into the sculpting world?
Yeah. Well, let me make you feel better, Gordon. I'm 45, so I've got a few years on you, mate. It's a good point to bring up, because I was old getting into this subject, and I was old going back to art school. So I was terrible at school. I was very, very shy as a kid.
Yep.
So I never was able to articulate what I was good at.
Right.
So, and of course, at that point, we were talking sort of, I was at secondary school in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You just got left alone. If you didn't speak out, if you didn't do, you wouldn't get any help. Most of my teachers left me on my own. And so what happened was I got what education I got was off my own back, off my own steam at home, because I just used to switch off at school.
Yeah.
So after grad, of course, I only got very, very little, minimal kind of qualifications coming out. So, And in the end, I did go to university when I was like 18, but it was for a subject I wasn't really interested in, and I kind of got not pushed into it, but it was something for me to do. To say I was in uni at that age and not wasting my time, but at the end of the day, it ended up wasting my time. So I kind of ended up working at a place where I was doing a bit of manual labour, a bit of warehouse work, and I was doing that into my sort of 20s, into my early 20s.
And this is, you're down south at this point. You're roughly down kind of like the middle of England, right?
Yeah, no. So I'm just down in Maidstone, but where that was in Dartford. So it's literally just sort of about 10 minutes south of London, that sort of area. It's funny because you really do realise you've made the wrong turn in life sometimes when you find yourself in these positions with people that are kind of in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with doing, with manual labour or anything. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
like there was a part of me that realised that I'd made a colossal error
Yeah.
in not applying myself. I don't blame myself actually looking back. It's just the way I was. I was a square peg in a round hole when
Well,
it came to the school
yeah.
system
I
in
mean,
the UK.
the thing I would say, just to interrupt you there, James, and I think it's something that I wanted to do a podcast on at one point, is like now looking back and me nearly 40, is that I think what I've experienced most of my life is ADD or ADHD or whatever they call it now.
Yeah,
The concentration, the multiple things of going and not being able to finish stuff, and the same being quiet at school, or the opposite, sometimes being too loud, or and like yeah, school just never fitted me either. And I was the same. I went back to uni when I was 31, so it's one of these things where I think there's a generation of people like us that grew up in the UK that have been somewhere on the spectrum and really struggled with social cues and meeting people in school, and like my teacher, my partner is a teacher, so like she sees that thing of now where kids really are, they kind of get left behind because the school won't slow down or speed up for them, so you're kind of just dealing with people who are struggling, and you can't give individualistic needs, so they kind of get left behind. So yeah, so that whole thing I think is basically wrought off to the fact that our education system in this country has really failed everybody. So yeah.
I can understand why as well, because like there's so many kids. So like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you're just going to get lost in the crowd. I think that's like quite common. And likewise, mate, I think there is there's some form of ADHD or learning difficulty that perhaps I've got.
Yep.
It's
Most
not
creatives
severe
have it, I
enough for
think.
me.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
I'll say most creatives have it. I think it is mostly, I found this, like, I think Darren Yo was talking about it on Facebook at one point, where he finds that it was something like 70% of his studio were somewhere on the spectrum. And I was like, that doesn't surprise me at all,
Yeah.
thinking about it.
That was the weirdest thing when you go to art school and they have like a unit there dedicated to that sort of
Yeah.
help people, and that's quite and that's fairly unique to art schools and the way it's set up. So I was always interested about that, and because the reality is a lot of artists that have those sort of problems.
Yep.
And yeah, so to go on to that, I kind of realized that like art was where I had a few opportunities to do some art stuff for people, for close friends and loved ones and stuff. And I
Yep.
realized, oh yeah, I really like this. Did some logos for people and things like that, the average sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, this is something I can do. I like doing it more than fulfilling orders in a warehouse and whatnot. So let's see where I can go. Actually, my mum at the time was an administrator in an art school.
Right.
So I got lucky. So I managed to get an interview for an HND qualification, which is not a degree. But it's still a higher
Good old HNDs, higher national
education.
diplomas. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a more practical form. But the teacher there was a very accomplished artist, and he was very encouraging. I met him, and he was like, "Yeah, we can get you straight in on the second year of this course, And so that's where my education started, formal education in arts. From there, I went on to do a degree. So I did a degree in illustration.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing you realise, going back to what we were talking about, is you realise, wow, there's lots of people like me out there. Like it's not just me that's the weirdo.
Yeah.
Like there's or different. I wouldn't say I'm any different from most people. It's just that my interests are a little bit different, I guess. I noticed. So it's nice finding those, being able to align with people a bit more, and it makes you feel better. And actually, it's quite an encouraging thing. It makes you want to do more work, and it's quite kind of it's a good feeling.
It's why
So
things like THU and industry workshops and a lot of these things I went to over the last couple of years have been good, because you're going to meet people who are on the same level as you.
that's so important. And I think this is one of the problems that we've got post-COVID, is that we've had the wind knocked out of a lot of those like industry workshops.
Yeah.
Where they were on the roll, they were every year. And now they're few and far between, So so I think it's such an important sort of thing to have that esprit de corps between, with other artists, and be able to bounce ideas off. And like at the end of the day, I can speak to my family and my folks and stuff, but after about 10 minutes they glaze over. They're not interested. So, which I can understand. So you need that kind of in-depth conversation that you can only have with other artists. Other industries have it as well. It's not just artists. It's a lot of other
I think
industries.
also because of like the whole remote working now, especially because like Sideshow are in fucking LA. I mean, so it's like
That's right.
you're never. I take it, you're going to be staying in the UK, so it's a thing where,
That's right.
you're going to basically have remote meetings. And I mean, my studio's in Canada, so it's the same where it's great, get to catch up with the guys now and again. But like, I would rather be people were next to me at a desk, like you could just have a conversation like we're having and speak to people for 5 minutes. It's a very weird way of working, I think, for our industry.
That's right. I mean, so I'll lead on to that because it's an interesting point. So, I mean, I basically after I came out of art school, I kind of floated around a little bit. I did sort of labels and worked as a graphic designer. So actually, some of my labels are still in Pound Stretcher or Poundland, whichever one's still in business. And you can still buy some of the coffee.
Right, yeah.
And I did the labels for them. So yeah, I did some of that, and it was fun. I learned a lot on that. But I kind of picked up ZBrush around 2012, 2013,
Right.
and it just went from there. I kind of just kept going. I got a few gigs doing actually a good friend of mine, Ed Barnett Ward, noticed me on ZBrush Central and got me my first gig, and that was Kids Cluedo with Hasbro.
Nice.
And so I'd started doing some work with him, and then I got like a couple of top rows for ZBrush Central, which was fantastic. That was really good. But I think going back to what we were saying, the big thing that happened for me and that kickstarted everything was when I went to Los Angeles for the first time, and met loads of amazing people. And I think that is probably the most powerful thing I did to kickstart everything in my career, because there's so many artists out there, but being able to speak to someone face to face, put a face to the name, that's a very powerful kind of thing that you can do. And it was at the time, it was way out, even 2017, not that long ago really. It was way out of my comfort zone going there. I've never been to Los Angeles or even on a plane on my own before.
It's so jarring, that place. Everything's like a million miles a second. Yeah.
No, I remember I turned up and I had someone picking me up from like a taxi that I booked, and it was this big Ukrainian dude, and we walked out of the sort of out into the main sort of area, and there was a fight in the middle of the road. Like, and he turned to me and said, "Welcome to LA," in a very thick kind of Ukrainian accent. I was like, "Wow," But he was such a nice guy. I left my hoodie in his car actually, and he drove. He must have driven home, and then he drove all the way back across LA to give it to me. So it's really funny. Like, he was a really nice guy. So it's those little stories that you do. They're not necessarily related to work, but when you go on these little adventures and you become, and you learn all these new things, and so that for me was a real kind of it was a point for me where I felt like that was. I've achieved that, and it really helped me as not just in my career, but as a person.
Yeah.
I think after that, I started to get more work from higher profile clients. I was able to meet a few guys over there that were able to give me work. But also not just that, I met a load of my friends over there. I met my friend Martin, who's a good friend of mine, Martin Verhoeven. And it's funny because when you start to be in these circles of people, you elevate yourself as well as them. That you feed off each other. So
because you're seeing their work also. I mean, you're seeing their work, you're seeing what they're putting out every day, and then you're like, I need to match that, and
But also you realise, and imagine a lot of people do this, but you're like, shit, I'm actually undercharging. I'm crazy undercharging for my work, and it's a common theme because no one told me how much to charge for my services or anything.
Right.
So you actually learn how to value your own time and work as well when you're around these sort of people. So it's an interesting kind of experience, sort of, and a big sort of learning curve. All of a sudden you kind of go from doing this thing that you've learned in your room, on your computer, and then you're in this industry that's got like big names in it, and think it was kind of jarring but exciting at the same time. So,
And is this the time when you're getting stuff like Work from Axis, because you've done stuff like Love, Death and Robots?
Yeah,
yeah.
So a little bit after that. So I think we did Monster Palooza actually. There's a few of us that met at that 2017 ZBrush Summit, and they wanted to do like Monster Palooza together. So they kind of asked me to join in that. That was a lot of fun. We did a few sculpts there. It actually didn't work out for us. I won't go into detail, but yeah, it didn't. It was a bit of a disaster. But even that was a kind of a learning curve with them, and actually that made us a bit closer as well. So I think that was good.
Was that you just didn't get a chance to like exhibit at the show, or?
We didn't, because the person that was supposed to be making stuff for us didn't deliver to the standard we wanted. So. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's antagonistic and all of that, which is not. It's one of those only experiences I've had as an artist where it was negative, in the industry. So but you're going to get that. This is the other thing with that success. You need to become a bit more streetwise as well. That was my epiphany for that as well. People that there are some. Because you meet so many nice people in the industry there, and that have your best interests at heart, mostly. And so, when you do meet the odd bad egg, it's jarring. But
it's a small industry. Yeah, it's a small industry. Yeah,
it is a small. Thankfully, that's a blessing as well, because a lot of the time these people don't last long. They kind of get frozen out. But I had the misfortune to encounter one of those people. So it was kind of one of those trips, though, that there was kind of a silver lining, because we met a few of the guys at Sideshow, and mostly David Igo, actually. David's a lovely chap. He's like one of these guys that's got it's got such a big personality, but he's also got a heart of gold as well. He's a really nice guy. And he said, "Look, guys, come and have a tour at Sideshow." So we actually went for a tour around. This was 2018, and we met a load of people. Met a few guys, and then we went out for dinner afterwards. And that was such a nice thing. It was such a negative trip, so it was a nice way to end it.
Yeah.
And then I kept in touch with some of those people. I actually got my first gig with Sideshow about 6 months, a year after that.
Right.
So that was pretty cool. And that also, at the same time, I'd met Martin Augusta out in LA the year before, in 2017. Right. Martin was the art director of XM Studios at the time.
Right.
And they were doing like a talk at the summit. But it was a really weird thing that I kind of met him as well, weirdly, because I ended up staying in a hotel that was right next to where all the speakers were staying. And I had no idea. I picked this hotel randomly. And it just turned out, and so I ended up spending I met him and a guy called Harry, who was also a sculptor for XM, at a Starbucks on the corner next to the hotel randomly.
Yeah,
and I ended up spending the day with him. So I had those two contacts, but David got me some work with Sideshow, but at the same time I was also working on the Batcave project that I was doing for XM Studios, as well as a few other miniature sort of projects.
Yeah.
And so it kind of things started to get scale upwards from there. So it was literally like what I can manage doing within my time, what I could kind of squeeze in.
Was that just to jump in, was that a big jump also from what you were doing from like the normal sculpting to doing collectibles? Was that like a new learning curve for that also?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to put my finger on that transition, and I think so. I suspect it was more of a natural transition. I always tend to put more detail than you were supposed to in miniatures,
right?
And so actually, I'd progressed up the scale a little bit with miniatures. Like I'd started at the wargaming sort of scale,
right?
And then we kind of moved up to the larger 75mm stuff, and then up to the 90mm stuff, and so the transition wasn't that jarring actually, because I was already able to put a lot of detail in. But there is a certain way of working in the bigger collectibles that is not there at the
miniature stuff.
Level.
Right. Yeah.
So I, you know, like it was a leap of faith for both those guys to use me.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I always remember, you know, Gordon, because in our careers you have those times when someone has taken a risk on you. Actually, Ed did that for me way back when he gave me Kids Clue.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, this is someone who is got a reputation with his clients, and some of these sort of things that he was doing were worth a lot of money to him. So
Mm-hmm.
getting someone in externally that and putting your trust in that person,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a big leap, and I always appreciate it because I've had to do it myself now a few
Yeah.
times.
Yep.
So, and it's difficult. It is difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, like just to answer that question, it was a leap. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I was always, you're always going to do something wrong in that when you're done. But it's whether the people that you're working with understand that. And I was very fortunate in that there was a lot of leeway there in those projects for me to learn. And you know, luckily I had a core set of skills that was always going to be there anyway,
Yeah.
and you could fall back on. There is an amount of confidence as well, Gordon, that you need to have.
Yep.
You know, you need to be able to walking in the room and owning the room. You
Yeah.
kind of got to walk into the project and own it a little bit. There's a slight, dare I say it, there's a slight amount of arrogance you've got to let yourself have.
Yeah.
With it. It's not arrogance. There's an ego to it. You know, like you've got to kind of straddle that ego a little bit when you come to these projects, because you know it requires an element of it. And
Yeah.
so you can understand a lot of these guys that do this, and then the ego kind of takes over. It's like
Yeah.
a big sort of green monster.
I think as long
But,
as if you've got even kind of an ego, I think some people do have, but as long as you have the talent to back it up, I think you're usually okay.
I think, yeah, you need to be able to rein it in. You need to
Yeah.
be able to. It's very difficult to step. Well, it's
Mhm.
like anything in life, right? It's very difficult to step back and self-praise and look at yourself and think, yeah, I actually got that wrong.
Right. Yeah.
This is actually a real core skill you'll need for big-scale collectibles and statues, because
Mhm.
you'll do things wrong all the time, and it's not necessarily your fault, but it's a fault in the process.
Right.
And so there is an element where you need to self-appraise, and you need to play devil's advocate a lot of the time with your clients, because you know they won't know what they want, and you have to kind of be searching and doing things wrong, and
Yep.
then being put back on the straight and narrow with a lot of these projects. It's quite an interesting and demanding way of working, and so it's
Mhm.
not for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, there's only been a few projects I've done where I've nailed it straight away, and even then I've second guessed it because I'm like, this surely I haven't nailed it straight away. Surely that's not worked. But yeah, there's only been a few like that,
Yeah.
and so yeah, there's a lot of back and forth, and this is where the teamwork kind of comes in
Yeah.
with things.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, even back 2018, I mean, we're talking that far back. The stuff I remember seeing for you even then on Instagram was I think the Lighthouse Keeper. That was one of the things that was
yeah,
coming
yeah,
up a
yeah.
lot. Yeah. That, and then I think you done the first sideshow thing you done was was it the Necron 99
That's
statue stuff
right.
thing?
The Red Rider.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun. I think where I managed to slot into sideshow
Mhm.
specifically was the way I sculpt. I'm a little bit more. I'm a bit like Raph in that I'm a brute force sculptor. I don't tend to use a lot of the features in ZBrush.
Mhm.
I tend to just sculpt, and that comes back to my traditional training. I
I was going
like
to
to.
say that's exactly why Raph does that, because he came from clay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have as nearly as much experience in clay as Raf does in that
Mhm.
context. But I was traditionally trained, so I like to straddle that. I don't like to go pure digital in the way I think. I try and think like a sculptor. And
Yep.
even that rubs people up the wrong way because I'm not a real sculptor, you know. But I do
Real.
tend to, yeah, exactly. But I do tend to think like one.
Yeah.
Also, I tend to think like an illustrator as well a lot,
Mm.
because that's my background. So
Yeah.
and I think that slotted in quite well with Sideshow, because Sideshow, of course, started off as a traditional studio, so they still have this very traditional idea of their statues, which I think does translate very well to digital. But you just then
Yeah.
you need to find the right artists, you know. So I don't tend to work from T pose. I tend to work straight into pose, and all of that sort of stuff, like, and I think that suits them, their way of working very well, because their work is very much a statement, of the sculpting.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the end result
interesting.
also. Yeah, I was going to say the end result, the medium you're going to finish up on is a statue. So I mean, like,
Yeah,
if you were going from clay to that anyway, But then I think, like, maybe where Raf had a discomfort, I think sometimes learning that curve was going into games where you need the T-pose stuff, you need like the
yeah,
stuff to be articulated, the more technical. Whereas again, you're just solely focusing on sculptures and statues. So
yeah. I mean, artistically, I've got loads of friends that are game artists, so I'm going to tread very carefully here. No, I think telling a story within a game's character and within the art of a game is a different, like, and it is something that a lot of very good games artists are able to do.
yeah,
Being able to tell the story within that T pose so that they
mhm,
can take it further.
yeah,
There is an element of that, and
mhm,
but what we're doing, that's where the two disciplines kind of diverge,
yeah,
because what I'm trying to do is tell a story in a static moment in
mhm,
time,
yep,
and so the skills needed for that differ a little bit from where you would get sort of the more kind of traditional ways of doing art, visual effects, and
yeah,
games.
yeah,
So yeah, it's an interesting thing that I think a lot of games artists perhaps haven't tried,
mhm,
and so it's always, I think I meet more people that are games artists wanting to go into statues than the other way
right,
around
yeah.
these days, because it's such a massive. I mean, the statue industry is tiny compared to the multi-million dollar kind of
A
industries
billion
of
dollar at this point for games, yeah.
billion-dollar industries of
Yeah.
VFX
I think
and
Raph is
gaming.
definitely like the unicorn in that industry where like he's straddled both those industries. He's been able to
Yeah,
move from
yeah,
statues into games and games into statues. So yeah.
yeah. And I think here's the thing about that, Raf, and artists like that.
Mhm.
I hope I'm in this group. For the purposes of the podcast, I'll include myself in this group, not to
Yeah.
stroke my ego. But here's the thing: I think the art needs to transcend the medium
Yeah.
for artists, and that is more important now than ever with
Mhm.
things like AI coming in.
Right.
I think a lot of artists are actually. I thought a lot of younger artists that still probably had this to learn have had to learn this quicker than I had to learn it,
Mhm.
because of these new technologies that are coming in and replacing them.
Yeah.
And it's something I think all artists, you look at some of the classic artists in art history, and you can see them come to this epiphany in their work, but yeah, at the end of the day, it needs to transcend you as an artist needs to transcend the medium.
Yeah.
And I think someone like Raf will be good no matter what medium he uses. And
Yes.
and, and I think that's the way I've set myself up to be. I
Mhm.
hope it's the case. There's always something that comes along to challenge that idea, though, which I like. I like
Yeah.
that. I like to be challenged. I don't like to rest on my laurels. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is the key thing moving forward with the arts and with the industries that we work in. That's the way they're changing at the moment.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
I
less
think,
the
yeah,
technical aspect of stuff, it's more the base art skills that, like even with a lot of guys who will draw really technically well, it doesn't matter if you put them in Procreate, Photoshop or whatever, like they'll still attain the end result. And I think that's what's been good about you is that you're quite flexible, kind of like a chameleon where you can move between different styles, different mediums. I mean, even the fact that like to throw it back to where you were doing stuff like in 2018, 2019, I remember like really getting excited about some stuff you were posting which was based on Dishonored, because obviously I'm a huge
yeah,
Dishonored fan. Massive. I've got,
yeah,
I've got this the mask in the corner,
yeah, me
Corvo's
too.
mask. Yeah. So yeah, so like the stylization of stuff that is more stylized realism versus like the super real gritty, huge muscle stuff. Like you can kind of mold between all of those different styles because you've done some anime stuff as well at one point as well. So it's like, you know,
Yeah, I worked for Figure Armor for a couple of statues, and those were fun.
Mhm.
Um, those are interesting because you're translating literally a 2D object into 3D, and
right.
so with all the challenges that come with that,
Yeah.
um, some of the characters are so well known and so beloved that you have to be very, very careful how you translate those,
Well, this was
because
the Samurai Showdown thing you done, I think, was it, or something like
yeah,
that?
I did. Rurouni Kenshin.
Right.
Was
Yeah.
the first one I did for Figurama, and that I still stand by my face sculpt actually on that. It was a lot of fun. I
Mhm.
made it too realistic, and of course it's too far away from what the fans are used to, so they had to
Right.
resculpt it a few times to get the fans comfortable with it. I
Yeah.
stand by the sculpt I did though, because it was a lot of fun. But yeah, it's the sort of challenge you get with those pieces where you've got a really die-hard sort of fan base, and
Yeah.
they are going to be a challenge to it's a challenge to get everything right. There's going to be a bit of back and forth
Yeah.
on those statues.
No one's going to be
Um,
100% happy at this point because everybody will have in their mind what things look like in their head. So yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and also at the moment, interestingly enough, in the statue industry, I think as time has gone on and it's gone from the traditional arts into the digital, things have got much more complicated. You know, when you look at statues how they were sort
Mhm.
of 15 years ago, and then you look at how they are now, there's
Yes.
lots more stuff in them. They're much more involved, and actually, that means they're more involved as a process as well. And I
Mhm.
think there is a disconnect between the audience and the artists and the teams and the
Yep.
creative teams involved, because it's so it is so involved. It's such an involved process. So uh, it's common for people to think, oh yeah, it's one person doing this statue. Well, I may have sculpted that statue,
Mhm.
but there's someone that engineers it. There's someone that paints it. There's a whole
Yeah.
team of people that brings that thing to life.
Yeah.
I mean, with XM Studios, the reality was that multiple people would work on that sculpture, that statue.
Yep.
And some of the best statues we did, like the samurai killer croc we did, that was three of us. I was the art director there, but there
Mhm.
was two other sculptors underneath me that did a lot of the lifting work on that sculpt.
Even
So
the White Knight thing you done with the bike, the Bat bike
yeah,
thing, that was
yeah,
Jesus. I mean, did you work on the bike or just Batman?
all of it. So actually,
Wow.
that was that again. So that's an exception to the rule. But I don't want to take that. So I did all of the sculpting, there, all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to take it away though from Martin, who art directed me on that piece, because he's invaluable. Even it's funny, even the little changes that he suggested, that
Mhm.
they contributed to the whole. But
Yeah.
of course, also Sean Murphy designed that bike. Although from the team and I designed a lot of stuff inside it as well to make it work. So I actually took a bike apart to understand how it would work.
My
And of
God.
course, when you were doing these things, Gordon, you're in the realms of of fantasy. So, like, there's a line you have to straddle between practicality and fantasy.
Yeah.
And of course, if you look at that bike, it would fall on you and kill you within about two
Yeah.
seconds
Yeah.
of driving
But
it
it
along the
still is
road.
even just a piece of hard surface art, like it's ridiculously good. Like, yeah.
Thank you very much. And so I'd been doing hard surface stuff for the Batcave for XM for about 2 years before I started that
Yeah.
piece. So but no one had ever seen it. No one had really. I wasn't known for my hard surface stuff. So
Yeah.
it was really good to get like a professional piece where I had some hard surface kind of work on show. And
Yeah.
of course, we did like a layered thing where you could take the armor off and see underneath. So that
Mhm.
was where looking at how a bike worked, but also things like I learned how a minigun works and where all the ammunition goes, and
Ah, right. Okay.
so
Yeah.
like it's just to make those little touches that make it all make sense. And what was
Yeah.
nice about that was no one asked us to do that. No one told us. It wasn't in Sean's original designs, but
Yeah.
we did it for the fans. And what's nice is the fans always pick us up on it, all the little details and all the stuff that we added, because it kind of makes sense within the fantasy
Yeah.
structure of that bike. It kind of
Yeah.
looks logical. So that
I
was
think
the
what I'm going
fun.
to do is, along with us talking, I'm going to try and put up some pictures of the stuff you've made because, like, I
Yeah,
think people just really need to see, like, if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, if you go to YouTube, obviously you'll see the video version. But like, yeah, the amount of detail in that skull. I mean, like, this isn't stuff that I've really got to even to hand. It's the fact that, like, just through your career, I've seen these showpieces essentially that I've came up and I've been like, Jesus, oh, James done it. My God, that's incredible. Like your stuff has always been mind blowing. Like I said, from the
thank
early
you
days
very
of
much.
like
Thank
the Lighthouse Keeper and then the Dishonored stuff to all the way up to the Batman sculpt. And I mean, there's just that, like, there's stuff every often you post things and I'm always like, oh, something else. So there's another Scott. Oh, it's James, of course. What's he done new? And even getting to do the Batmobile at one point, you know, in ZBrush, and like you said, the Batcave stuff you've done. And I think even at one point we were having a conversation at a Comic-Con about you because, and your name came up in a Comic-Con. I wasn't even talking about you. And it was because you done the, was it the 2000 AD, Judge Anderson sculpt?
Yes. Yeah.
People were talking about it and they were showing me like the pictures on your Instagram, and I was like, oh, he'd seen it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, that's James. Like I didn't know you, but I was like, I know of James. Like I follow him, we're friends on Facebook. Like I'm like, oh really? Like, oh, I tell him like, well done. Like it was a really good fucking sculpt. So like every time these showpieces come out, like your name is always about the place because they're so good. Like I mean, they're such a
Thank
good
you
piece.
very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that Judge Anderson one. Actually, it was one of those opportunities that I had to just do my own sculpts, and it was actually live for a friend of mine as well on the stream. So there's actually somewhere there's online there are videos of me actually making that, which is great. I really enjoyed that. It was at a time when things were difficult with XM professionally. Not in that XM have always treated me very well, but in terms of creatively, that I was in the middle of a sculpt that was basically kicking my ass. So it was nice to get. Actually, I think that's why I'm so happy with that Judge Anderson piece, because it was me venting a little bit and being free to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I mean, the shame is that unfortunately 2000 AD is a license where licenses go to die, and it's like it's a license from my childhood, but no one ever buys. People make stuff for 2000 AD, but it's a hard sell, and so that's always a difficult thing to learn when you want to do all these great projects, but sometimes they're not commercially successful, or they're known not to be commercially successful.
I mean, it's surprising, like, with Anderson, obviously, having watched the films and stuff and read the comics growing up in the UK, but, you know, everybody always wants to do Dredd. That's always the dream project.
Yeah.
He's always the character to do, and he's kind of like our version of Batman almost at this point with a gun. But like, yeah, I mean, even the fact that, like, I mean, talking about being British, but you got to do the Trooper as well for Iron Maiden, you know, like, and that was a whole thing.
Yes.
Doing that as well.
I've got a bucket list, like I imagine a lot of other sculptors have, of stuff I'd like to do, and that was on it. And I was approached by Sideshow to do that. Literally a year, because these things take about a year. We'll probably go into that perhaps in a bit, but it takes a while for us to make this stuff. But it was just a bit before I joined XM. And I was approached by Ricky from Sideshow to do that. And Ricky's a massive metalhead as well. So, like, we just had we had too much fun. It should not be. You should not have that much fun on a project, right? They should take money away from you if you enjoy it that much. It didn't feel right. It felt like I was robbing them. But it was good fun. What they like about working with me is that I tend to research my characters very well. So for the uniform on the Trooper, if no one's seen that album cover, it's like it's like a Victorian era sort of soldier with a classic red tunic on. So I went back and watched Zulu Dawn and Zulu from all of these kind of very well known, not particularly politically correct these days, but very well known films. With all the uniform, and I would pause and I would look at the uniforms and see how they were structured and really kind of research where everything went. There's a bread bag, there's a canteen, and so I was able to add these into the statue, which was really, really good fun.
It's
and
the comic. It's the comic nerd in all of us, I think. We're like, I mean, like for me, definitely, like bucket list. If I ever got to be so fucking lucky, would be like, I mean, there's three. There's Batman. There's X-Men and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's like the three I would ever want to hit because they're like iconic from my childhood. But I think it's also that idea of like being an outcast or an outsider where like, so like, you know, I wear metal shirts all the time. Like I've noticed already your ginger, like your t-shirt, like I love that band. They're incredible. The female vocalist. I'm want to go see her at one point, and also guys like Spirit Box, and I went to see Sleep Token a couple of years ago. But like, so I think the whole metal alternative emo phase of like the whole of the UK that came about with that stuff in comics, and you know, like for a lot of us that are in this industry now, it is living a fantasy of like the stuff you grew up with and then combining it into like art and then making products from it. So like the Eddie stuff. I was never a massive Maiden fan. I remember I went to a gig years ago where Maiden, where I actually went to see the support act that were Funeral for a Friend, and they got booed off the stage at one point because nobody wanted to see them. They just wanted to see Maiden. But like, yeah, so like I think we all share that inherent like love of like, you know, comic books and superheroes, and it's stuff you get to work on. And like you said, you've got to do Batman stuff, which is a huge thing for a lot of people, and me especially. And you know, even stuff like your Spider-Man sculpts, like the Venom stuff, like, you know, and even getting to do the Batman Beyond Ninja thing, like that was just also like a
Yeah,
huge project, I
that
can
was the
imagine.
sculpt that was kicking my ass. Actually,
It looks like it. Jesus Christ! Picture on screen now of how fucking technical that sculpt is.
it was a 9-month sculpt.
Yeah,
So like, yeah, and so it's back and forth, and I had to. I think for me, being critical, the base, we just couldn't get that base to work,
right.
which is a shame because I like the character, but we just couldn't get it to. We couldn't. It's like for me, it was pretty much like the kitchen, throwing everything in the kitchen sink in the base.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, there's a lot going on at the bottom. Yeah,
yeah. It was difficult. It was a real challenge, but in the end, like I'm not. I would say a lot of my sculpts I'm not 100% happy with. You're always going to be critical about that,
yeah,
and so you just tend to let the fans judge it. And there's some people that really love that statue. There's some people that hate it, but
yeah.
there's some people that really like it. And yeah, it's doing something like that. Luckily, I had my art director Pablo Vicentin, because what XM would do was they get one of the other assistant art directors to come in and oversee the project with you, which helps because you don't want to be doing this stuff on your own. They're crazy sculpts. So I was very fortunate to be with Pablo on that project and having him sort of guiding me.
Yep.
But yeah, that kind of sculpt to combine like hard surface and you know the organic side of things, and it's got literally everything in it that you could ever want to sculpt. So yeah,
Yep.
it was a challenge, and it took me I would say about 9 months. So it's probably holds my record for the
The
longest
longest thing.
sculpt.
Which is
Yeah,
interesting to then go to something like the Black Suit Spider-Man, which is quite low
yeah.
key kind of plain.
Yeah, the black suit is probably the closest I've got to like a statement, you know, like anatomical sort of piece. I tend to steer clear of them because
Yep.
I feel like there are better artists out there for that. But I
Mm.
got, you know, like that had an interesting story, that statue, because we sculpted it, I think, in 2019. And then it went through a big round of changes, back and forth, back and forth. I won't go specifically into it, but
Mm.
you know, a lot of these statues, they have to be approved by the licensor. So they'll go through an approval process, and sometimes the licensor will come back with, you know, saying they don't like this or that, and then we have to change it. And yeah, so that was one of those statues that had a little bit of back and forth, and we had to redesign the base for that a couple of times. So that was a lot of fun, though, to be honest, to come just to have that pure kind of statement.
Yeah.
Also, the reality with that is that Sideshow had already done a massively superior piece to it. You know, like you know, basically they'd already hit. It was a very difficult statue to do and not be compared to the Sideshow statue, because the Sideshow one by Guillermo was like fantastic. So yeah, it's always difficult to have that kind of like thing hanging over you, like Damocles, you know,
Yeah.
where you think, it's never going to be as good as that, right? So at some point you just think, right, I'm just going to do what I think is going to work, and then, you know, it is what it is. You know, you can't do, as long as you've done your best on those things. You know,
Yeah.
I think hopefully it rubs off, you know, with the fans.
I mean, it's difficult, I think, also with like the franchise of working in collectibles, because you know, like games, I think, have a wider breadth of talent, and you know, there's different levels and different projects where if you work in the collectibles world, you're working with kind of some of the best, because the skill threshold is so high in that industry because of what you're working on. So is it kind
Yeah,
of like, yeah, difficult?
it's been a blessing and a curse, actually. Of course, as going back to what we were saying, you know, it tends to rub off. So if you surround yourself with these people with these amazing skills, you will learn a lot, and in the process, if you're open-minded about things and are
Yeah.
willing to kind of be, you know, be self-appraising. But of course, there's a lot of pressure that comes with it. At the end of the day, although these statues are team efforts, it's a much smaller team than it would be, on the games. But I know that there's indie games as well, but in general,
Typically, yeah.
Yeah, but the products that we make cost a lot of money to make, and they are risk. They are, pardon me, a potential risk for the companies involved. So you do have that on your shoulders, and the higher up the chain you are, the more responsibility, of course, for that product you have. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure. The talent is crazy. I've been very fortunate to share some of these projects with these amazingly talented sort of people. I mean, Alan DeSales and Pablo Vicentin, we at XM, we created this fantastic team, and we're friends as well, which really helped. The amount of stuff I was able to learn from them, Gordon, it's invaluable.
Yeah.
So you have to go into these industries with an open mind. But the other thing is that there is a massive barrier for entry for people that want to get into it. I don't know if someone asked me, how do I get into the, collectibles industry? It's very difficult. It's very difficult because the bar is set so high,
Yeah.
and that's the expectation that a lot of these companies have. So if you're just starting out as a sculptor, and learning all this stuff, I don't know how you would overcome that outside of putting the time in, just working away at yourself, and maybe doing what I did, which is working in the miniatures industry and 3D printing your own stuff and just building up from there.
Yeah.
I
mean,
certainly
even like
couldn't gone straight into the industry.
Yeah. I mean, like, definitely, like, I saw the early location of stuff in your portfolio, like, especially with just your Instagram, where, like, you were doing, like, I think at the time it was just I was following so much of your Dishonored stuff, like, because obviously everybody loves that game. So, like, like your miniatures of like Dowd and stuff like that, and Emily, like, there was a whole slew of stuff you were doing, and I think that's where, like, which is interesting to talk about now. I think leading on is like the world of 3D printing, because I just watched a video on YouTube where someone was trying to print a life-size statue of Magneto, and it was like ridiculous because he has just massive like parts, like a whole thigh that's in 3 bits, and then an arm, and I was like, Jesus Christ. But like 3D printers are getting to that scale now, right, where like you can almost get away with printing like whole models in one thing.
I think so. I think it will. With that though comes a lot of technical stuff that people don't tend to know until they bought a printer. Do you know what? I'm getting rid of my printer here. I'm going to use a service from now on because it's just too much work for me. It's a smelly, messy process. Actually, I much prefer painting than printing. So and I think over time it's become more specialized. Like you get people that like printing, they love printing, and they know a lot about the printers and all that. And I can engineer something. I get to that point, and then I know I'm pretty good with a Formlabs printer, and I can print some really good stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a bridge too far for me. So that's where I think 3D printing is going. It's going to specialize. I can't see it getting easier. I can see it getting bigger, but I can't see it getting easier in the next sort of 5 years. I think the resolution and the efficiency is getting better, but not the ease of use. It's a strange thing.
Is that where like the technical skills are kind of overlapping the traditional stuff again, and then you're finding yourself not being engaged as much?
Well, one of the other things that Sideshow do, of course, is although they're digital, they still do traditional sculpting over the top. So there's still that where I will sculpt something and then it will get printed, and they're like, we can improve that. And instead of going back through the whole digital process, they will sculpt on top.
Right.
Or, they've got much more of a free mindset like that, and I think that's where you can be multidisciplinary with this stuff. I do think like 3D printing is a good thing to learn. Because if you want to go and do collectibles as a job, then you need to understand. It's like literally understanding topology when it comes to games and visual effects and read topology and UVs and all that. Thankfully, we don't have to do that in my business, but that's actually, it is one of the necessary evils to learn 3D printing. Learn where you put supports, where you break something up. learn a little bit about the casting process as well to help whoever's making your stuff.
Yep.
This was something I learned early on. Actually, I was able to learn that through miniatures,
Yeah.
and it actually scales upwards into the bigger stuff. So it's actually quite a useful, thing to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think like the thing you talk about as well when you talk about all these processes and pipelines, it's like you're not too disconnected from games. I mean, like you talk about like the small kind of projects and the people within it, and it's bigger, but like Raf's whole character department, I think on God of War was like maybe 6 or 7 people at the time. Guys like
yeah,
Glauco and stuff, and Igor, but like yeah, like even the fact that like the higher you up, the more pressure you get on. I think they're very similar industries. Obviously, I think games are way more profitable. We know this just because it's a media that people consume way more of.
yeah,
Collectibles not so much because obviously like you said they're expensive to make. Like a good statue's a couple of grand, depending on which one you're buying. And you have to buy them months in advance. They have to put an order in for them. So it's different. But like I do feel like it's getting to the point, or it's going to get to the point, I think, where because of AI incoming, this is what I see in my head anyway. Those technical skills could also be replaced in the fact that like UV and topology and retopology, like if a button could be pressed on your statues or your collectibles and that was done for you, then the character was game ready. You know what I mean? Like that might open a door for people like you or people who have came from the sculpting world and want to get into games but don't really
yeah,
maybe want to go as in depth technical. So
yeah.
yeah,
This is again going back to the art must transcend the medium.
yep,
Like you have to. I think going forward, a lot of us have to have that attitude now towards our own training and development.
yeah,
Because nothing is going to be safe from AI. It will happen. Like, well, you're in the UK. Like, how long are we going to stay using stick shift manual gears in our cars? Right.
oh yeah.
Like, I
Everybody
had this
on
conversation with a friend. Like, if you go to the States, it's all automatic, but we
dude,
still insist on using
yeah.
it will be like that.
I literally just had this conversation because my partner's learning to drive, but like everybody now who learns on automatic. Like it is a thing where
Yeah.
nobody wants to learn a stick shift anymore. They just want to push the pedal and
It's
go.
funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
like yeah.
I learned late. I learned in my mid-20s, but like
Mhm,
I like it was like if you got looked down on if you said I want an automatic.
mhm.
But the funniest thing is when I tried to use an automatic, I kept pushing the brakes, thinking it was the clutch, and so I was going down. I got a hire car, I was going, down the road. But it's
Yeah.
so we can kind of equate that to what we're doing in art. Like I
Yeah.
think there's that resistance at first, but
Mhm.
eventually everyone will start using it, and as generations move up the chain,
Yeah.
they're going to be more used to using it. It's just a
Yeah.
natural way of things. So,
Yeah.
so I think in that way, using that analogy, I'm more than happy to use an automatic, right? So,
Yeah.
so if but the problem we've got at the moment, of course, is that there's a lot of other baggage that comes with the automatic for us, the AI systems, right? So it's a very interesting kind of world in the creative arts at the moment, and there's a lot of minefields. There's a lot of things that are going on that are not
Hurdles.
ethical,
Yep.
it's difficult to navigate
Yeah.
at the moment. So I can't imagine what it's like being a student. I wouldn't want to be a student in
It's a
a
difficult
public
time, I think,
environment.
because essentially is what I am as an eternal student. But at this point, I'm like we've talked about earlier, where I'm trying to switch up what I'm doing. But
Yeah,
I think in general, the way things are looking so far, especially in the EU, which now of course we've left, oh, fucking joys,
yeah,
but they have now inserted protections for AI, so they have regulations now in place that companies have to disclose their data sets, and if they are unethical or illegal, they won't be able to use those data sets. It also covers a lot of stuff like AI for camera surveillance, so stuff like China's social credit system that won't happen in Europe because there's no laws against it. So it seems like the EU is pushing laws that are in our favour, which is good
yeah,
because eventually, I think if we ever get back into the EU, fucking fingers crossed, those protections will come back in. But like, I know if America gets on board, because I think China has also done something very similar where they're also now against the AI. If
yeah,
America can get on board, then everything will kind of be sorted. But I think, like you said, the key is always foundations. I was talking to Esmond Lash about this not too long ago about even still doing 2D at this point because people have got this thing about like, should I even be drawing anymore? Should I even try for character concept art? And Esmond was like, look, I would also learn environments because I think it makes you more flexible, but also yeah, like I think it's totally feasible. And like Feng has also put videos out about this, about how AI can't really do what you can do, because it's not.
No,
It's never going to reach like a problem solving level where you're building interiors and you need to solve that problem, or you're making sculpts and you need to solve that problem about, well, the base isn't working, how do we fix the base? That comes back to the human problem solving. And a data scientist I talked to recently, who's been studying AI for the best part of like 30 years, was like, look, it's never going to be there. Like, and the whole flagship of AI and stuff now is literally just a snake oil scam. Everybody who
yeah,
was in, NFTs at one point left that and went to crypto. Everybody who then, when crypto crashed, that left that went to AI. It's just another thing, another spin on technology that's never going to deliver. So,
I think the weakness of AI is what it actually circumnavigates, and that is the process. It
yes.
actually completely circumnavigates the process, and this is what a lot of AI artists are not understanding: is that in a professional sense, for what we do at Sideshow,
Mm,
is the process. Like the process takes time, and there's a reason for that, and that is basically development. At the end of the day, no one. I could spit out a few, concepts, but they're going to be
mm,
unusable, and, and,
yeah.
and it needs interaction between in the team, in the development.
Yep.
I can't see an AI replacing that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from my perspective, the current iterations of AI, I've said this publicly, so I'll say it again. They are they're unethical.
Hmm.
They're not. There's no ethics behind them.
Yep.
But the reality is that I've felt for a while,
Hmm.
looking at ArtStation back in the day, and some of the new platforms, Instagram and Kara, for example,
Yep.
that art was in a rut, in a
Hmm.
commercial rut actually, and you would go through ArtStation, everything would look the same. It would have a very similar Overwatch style or whatever style was in that, and I do think we as artists need something to knock us out of that trend, to
Yep.
look at something, help us look at something new. I feel like AI could be that. At the moment, it's not,
Hmm.
which is even more of a colossal shame. I
Hmm.
actually have used a mild AI for a recent statue
Hmm.
to help me visualize something that I had trouble visualizing. And that's where I feel AI can really help, because in that way I can involve it in the process and
Hmm.
still control it.
Yeah.
What a lot of people aren't doing is controlling. They've got no control over it whatsoever.
Yeah.
It just spits out and then their way of controlling it is spitting out loads and then
Yeah.
sifting through, which is just not. It's not going to work,
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do think going forward, it's something we should all be fairly open-minded about.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, like,
yeah,
no, I was going to say, like, I definitely feel like we can all agree, like, the ethics is shit and that needs to get sorted. But like beyond that, yeah, if that can get sorted and that can get solved, then sure. Like,
yeah,
for research purposes, for thumbnailing, for stuff very early on, I think it will be useful. And I think, the people I spoke to who have used it in the process and aren't using it commercially, or aren't using it and saying, "I made this thing," as like I'm an
yeah,
artist, this is my thing. When it's literally just to drum up ideas about, like a dagger you're designing or a sword or something, and you don't really quite know where to start. Like, sure, like that process undoubtedly will be great because it's sped up in that sense. But yeah, that is what coming from somebody who was not an artist, who was a gamer, who was a consumer, who wasn't a maker. Like learning about how the process is, the whole thing has been my journey the last 5 years since I left uni. Is that
yeah,
learning
yeah,
about how, when people designed characters for Dishonored, looking through the art books, cool. But the cooler part was like sitting behind the guy who was then sketching Corvo, and Arn Emily, and working out, right, so what does their collar look like? Or he's got a sword this time around, is it the same shape? Like that stuff is the things that gets me excited, is the things you think about. You're going to design a Spider-Man or a superhero. Fantastic. Oh my God, I get to design like a staff or a sword, or what's that going to look like? And yeah, like it's the whole twist and making something really cool, taking a former IP like the Batman Ninja stuff, and right, cool, I've
yeah,
seen Batman Beyond, I know what the cartoon looked like, but then also now we're going to transform it into the super hyper realistic hard surface thing. How does that? What does his armor look like? That stuff, is where it comes alive for you as an artist.
yeah. And I think that's the other side of things. Then is the commercial aspect, and this is what something is very difficult to get across to people is that there's a large section of the audience, probably most of the audience, that don't care how this stuff's made, and are being sold a product.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't see or care about your input into something. Only to as far as the fact to blame you if it doesn't look how they want it to. This is also lots of art directors everywhere, but
Yeah.
they're like art directors on steroids. But yeah, I so there's that as well. There's that element to it. It's a really difficult balance to get right, and it's very much so the case with as we were saying in the statue industry, where there is that disconnect between the end audience and us at the process level. And yeah, it can be you can be funneled down a certain direction because of the commerciality of something.
Yeah.
That is sometimes it's a really difficult pill to swallow.
Yep.
If you're, but sometimes it's the way things work. So, how you deal with changes. The licensor will want to change something,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd have put your heart and soul into something, and it doesn't work for the character for the licensor, and
Yep.
all of that. It can be really, really difficult to navigate that as well. So
Yeah.
there's all this stuff, and so where AI comes in, I think there is that there, those people. Like so a couple of times, like I've been in the gym or somewhere in public and struck up a conversation with someone, and they're like, as you do, like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm a sculptor. That's the nearest thing I can equate. I'm not a sculptor,
Yeah.
really, but I am,
Yeah.
But of course, for a layperson, they won't. If I could spend an hour trying to describe what I do to them, but it's that, yeah. But at the end of the day, what it boiled down to, a lot of these people, they were like, oh, you don't, I work on a computer. Well, it was like, oh, well, you must, it's push a button and it happens. Well, now we are actually at that point,
Yep.
But the reality was that's what a lot of people thought we did anyway,
Yeah.
So it's a funny situation, and so in some ways, I think a lot of the public, they don't see a difference. There's no, they're kind of scratching their heads thinking, well, what are people so annoyed about? Isn't that what you guys did anyway, sort of thing.
I had a friend who was literally like talking about displaying stuff at Comic Con in a group conversation, and one guy was like, "Oh, I do that now. I've just found this app. I make prints with these apps," and everyone at the whole table was just like holding their head, like, "Oh, fuck, okay, fair enough, yeah, sure." But like, yeah, like the whole idea of like pressing the button and then something pops out is definitely like where we're going. But yeah, I think it's a thing of like trying to define yourself as an artist is more than just like the digital screen. And we were talking about the thing of like now trying to get away from the computer and get back to that traditional sense of
transcending the medium at the end of the day.
Yeah,
This is the
yeah,
thing, and people at the end of the day, people respect the idea and the storytelling. This is why people still buy comic books. They absolutely
yeah,
love them.
yeah.
There's still visual storytelling, and I
I
think
mean,
there's still an appetite for that.
the good thing I've
You know.
yeah, the good thing I've seen about AI is twofold, and the one thing is that people have the community has come together in a huge way that which I think has never happened before, where we're all kind of getting each other's backs, and which is great. But I've also now seen this whole trend of like normies or lay people almost flying the flag for artists and being like, no, like don't back
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
stuff. Like go and support human artists. Like they need, like even my partner's Dismay, she's on TikTok a lot and stuff. But I've seen so many TikToks of young kids or young teenagers or even people in their early 20s who are like, stop buying AI art, stop supporting AI art. Go to Comic Con and support your local artists and buy comic books and honestly, it's something I thought I'd never see is people cheering for us and treating for us to have equal
Yeah,
rights. And so,
I
yeah.
think it's value, isn't it? It's again, there's another little thought experiment
Mhm.
was when if any of the listeners or yourself, if you've ever been asked to do something by a friend, art wise, they would be like, can you do this or that? And you're such a good. They'll always sort of give you, pardon my French, but the old shit sandwich. They'll tell you something nice and then ask you to do something and then
Yeah.
tell you you're great again. And the amount of times that someone said, "Oh, you're great," can you sculpt my dog, or can you do this or that?
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, yeah, sure, like, that will be £2,000, £3,000, and then like, what? So they value you up to a point where
Yeah.
you actually have to, so it is an interesting that arts above all, they have this problem where they aren't people struggle with the value behind them.
Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, I grossly undercharged for my statues coming up. So even I was guilty of it. I think we all are. Because at the end of the day, you're charging for your time, and time is one of the most valuable things in the world, right? It's something we should all be charging lots of money for. But of course, you don't value it when you start. And again, so this goes deeper into the audience. So it's nice to have finally see people valuing what the arts and the arts coming together. I think there's so much potential there. That we can lay people can get from the arts industry, because a lot of the time people are saying, oh, it's artists are gatekeepers or whatever, which is the farthest thing from the truth.
Nobody's gatekeeping art. Nobody at all is gatekeeping art.
No, in fact, if anything, everyone's encouraging other people to pick up a pencil, or pick up ZBrush, pick up whatever, and just draw something.
There's a whole beginner's ZBrush course on YouTube for free at one point. Like, you could go and literally on YouTube and learn it for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I learned ZBrush on my own from just other people, and like at the end of the day, the resources are there, and it just takes a bit of bravery to just stick with it and do it, because there is that point where everything you're doing is going to be wrong. So it's your mindset that's actually the key. That actually never goes away, Gordon. There's always an ugly side to your work. Like when I start, I'm starting from on pieces now for Sideshow, and they look so bad. They look really bad, and it's just the way things work, and it's your problem solving behind that, and it's the faith in your own abilities, and maybe the stubbornness behind it as well. Like all of those things you learn over time. It's a constant. So anyone expecting that things get easier, they don't. They actually get harder.
And then having that self-critical eye is the thing that makes you a better artist and keeps you sharp as you get older and do more projects. As you're always looking at stuff and thinking, because I mean, at one point, like it's like I watched a comedian who is like, the imposter syndrome is actually a symptom of you're good at your job. He's like, most people who are great at their job or are high level people never walk out of their work and they're like, well, I fucking smashed that today.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like that. Well, actually, it's quite nice because with the statues, you've got like a legacy thing that you've done, and you can, and it's kind of visual. Like it's tangible. So with that Iron Maiden piece, for example, I didn't feel at the time, but then it's produced. I'm like, I really enjoy. I sculpted that really well. I'm really happy with that. Yeah. So there is that. What's nice about that piece is the band wrote us an email.
Nice.
They wrote and to Sideshow saying how much they loved it, and they don't like anything they're miserable old gits. So like, apparently, so it was nice. So there's that we have that benefit in the arts where we do have these things that we've made, further down the line, and they can have a life of their own. And you can enjoy their success. I think that's a different thing than saying, I'm fantastic, look at me. But it's enjoying the success of something, like that. That's quite nice, and something I've had to kind of train myself to do, and not be too kind of critical,
I mean, in the sense of valuing your time, I think a great way to end this conversation we've had is talking about a story about Leonardo da Vinci. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but he basically was at the kind of peak of his career at the time, and where he was studying and where he was living. And it was a thing where somebody walked past him and said to him, "Oh, Mr. Da Vinci, like a famous artist, like I love your work. Do you think you could quickly sketch something for me on this piece of paper and sign it?" And he was like, "Sure." He says, "But I'll have to charge." And he says, "Of course, whatever." And Da Vinci sketched, I think, for 30 seconds and produced this really incredible piece of work and handed it to the guy and said, "That'll be, I'm going to make a number up, but something like £500 or something like that." And the guy was like, "That's crazy. It took you 30 seconds to draw that piece." And what Da Vinci says, and which is the famous quote, is that it took me 30 years to learn to draw that in 30 seconds. So that is the epitome of what we do, is that you're not just paying for people's time, you're paying for the years of experience they've took to get to this point.
yeah,
So
yeah, and
yes,
that's interesting in and of itself, actually, because there is a point where you kind of you switch over. So like when you're first starting to learn and stuff, you do charge for time,
mhm.
and then it gets to the point where you become popular, and then you charge a flat rate, which
For a
is,
project, yeah,
like, yeah, which is your name's attached, so that has a value to it, a tangible value. So
yep,
yeah, it is interesting, uh, to go through that in your career, and then hopefully, if you make it, then you have that kind of intrinsic value to your work that outside of the time that you spent on
yep.
it has its own sort of value.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
people now
quite
aren't people aren't coming to you now because they just need a sculptor or a good sculptor. They're coming to you because you're James Cain. I mean, like that's
Yeah, I would that would be nice. Perhaps that is it. I don't know. Do you know what? I've never really thought about it, Gordon. Like
yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's nice just to be wanted. It's
yeah,
difficult. Everyone's losing their jobs at the moment in the creative industry, and it's difficult to,
yeah.
like that's another reason why it's difficult to get excited about new jobs and
But
stuff.
but
You
but
see all
but
this stuff going.
James, don't feel guilty for having success. Like, if anything, literally, as people were being laid off for Blizzard, and I was talking to a friend Tyler who just accepted a job there, he was like, "I don't even want to fucking post about it." And I was like, "Tyler, don't you dare!
Yeah, it's
Please
difficult, isn't it?
post.
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
post about your job. You have worked, and I've known him. He's wanted to work for Blizzard for the last 10 years. Celebrate that victory. Don't feel like you're because everybody who, even if they've lost their jobs, people will still want to cheer you on because that's just the way the community works. And
yeah.
like
It's nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a thing where like your job could be gone at one point and then what happens to you, but like you celebrate the victories while they're here because then like you say that things can change tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen, so you don't want to be a thing where you were complacent about your victory of getting into sideshow as an art director. You like, no, I celebrated it. I was present in that moment. I was very mindful of where I was at the time. I was very in the moment of this is what I've earned, that I've worked really hard to get here, taking that and really feel it because it'll never happen again, essentially. So
Yeah, it's true. It's
yeah,
true. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, but I mean that's the same to everybody who works in the creative industry, is that you always be kind of present with where you are, because even though I'm not where I want to be, like I'm still working in the industry. I'm still getting paid to do a job that is art. Coming from
Right.
a background of working in the railway in the UK on telephone systems, like
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I look at the days when it's pissing with rain in Scotland, and I'm like, I don't have to go out. I don't have to go out today. I can just sit in front of my computer. So,
Yeah,
like,
exactly. I think sometimes you need to remind yourself of those things as well. Like it's nice to see your journey through things and understand. Oh, wow, I'm at this point now where I've been through all of that, and like it makes you feel much more grateful about things. And
I
yeah,
mean,
it's,
if you could go back and talk to yourself in that factory and say, one day, James, you're going to be an art director at the biggest collectibles place on the planet, at a company that works out of Los Angeles, California. That's
yeah.
going to be your future. Yeah, I mean,
I'd say you'd crazy. I'd say you'd be crazy. Yeah,
no shit.
it's funny, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So
So I
yes,
think it's one of these things where I think the thing I've always said in my career is you don't compare yourself to other people. You compare yourself to an older version of you and look
yeah,
about, when I was 28 and I was working in my dead end job, and, it was one of my coworkers, who said to me, I think I was taking an online drawing class at the time, and he was like, what are you going to do with that? And I was like, oh, I don't know, like I might do start some comic book art, or I might do, he's like, oh, Gordon, you'll work in this job, you're going to die in this job. And I was like, no, no, it's not gonna happen. So I think only about 6 months after that, I handed in my resignation. So,
oh,
and
okay.
that's why people, I think, are tuned to my podcast and have wrote me emails about how much it's inspired them, because
Oh, good.
just taking that journey of like, yeah, there's a kid in Australia who was literally like, email me being like, I've just turned 30. I'm going to go back to art school because of your journey. I've been really inspired. And like, I'm telling you now, James, like the tears were running down my face. And, it's
Oh,
like,
that's lovely. Yeah, yeah. This is where
sorry.
we can really connect with people through art, I think,
Yeah.
and there's no age distinction here. Like you can start at 50 and still achieve something.
Oh yeah,
I really
100%.
do
Yeah.
believe that. I
Yeah.
think the problem nowadays is that we do compare. It's a human thing, right? We always compare ourselves to other people. So and social media is enhanced that.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to find that balance where you've got to come off. Myself, I've come off social media a little bit over the last couple of years since I joined it,
Same. Yeah.
because I thought, I've got nothing to prove particularly. Like I've gotten in a really nice job, I'm
Mhm.
happy, and I don't really need it. And I think this
Mhm.
is the thing. I think a lot of people see it as that lifeline in their
Yep.
career, and it's kind of a double-edged sword because everyone else is doing that as well. So you're instantly things are sort of coming through your feed where you think, oh bloody hell, he's done that and it looks so good, and
Yeah.
mine's rubbish, and how are they going to pick me over him? And yeah,
Yeah.
this is the way the human mind works. And I think the best thing about art is that you can focus on it as an individual
Mhm.
and get something from it. Everyone gets something a little bit different, and
Mhm.
they're able to achieve something different with it. So I
It's
think,
almost the
yeah,
opposite in other industries where like the networking part of it isn't as important. Like I've seen people who, unlike me, like I'm known throughout the industry very famously. Like there's people in lots of massive studios that know my name and know who I am and know who the podcasts are. But I'm not known for my work. I'm not known for my artwork at this point, So that's the opposite effect I wanted. Whereas like I know people who don't even have an art station. They don't have any social media accounts. They literally will send emails to people with a PDF portfolio and they'll get work. So I mean, like it is one of these things where the work has to come first. That's the most important thing, and I think
yeah.
social media is really at this point no necessary for us.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm not interested to see how Cara develops. I think
Yep.
ArtStation was that did perform that function quite well in the past, but I mean, it lost a lot of our trust, I think, over time.
Yep.
I would like to see how Cara does like for that, especially as an art director, because I'm looking at people's work in terms of whether they can work with us or not, like
Yep.
and all of that. So, like I'm looking at it from that perspective now. So yeah, I do think community is very important to artists. We're kind of very tribal like that. I think
Yep.
it's nice, and we're more productive when we're in a good environment like that.
Yeah.
So I think Instagram specifically has been very toxic for that environment. I think it's discouraged it. I think it's channeled people in the wrong way over the last couple of years. The exposure that people get from it has gone down as
Mhm.
well. And it's kind of put people in their little echo chambers, which it's not healthy as an artist to be like that. So I think, I'd like to see more open communities like Cara. I know it's been around for a while. I know
Mhm.
there's a few others as well, but that's the buzz one at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hope I know that they're a small team, so I hope they can achieve something good
Yeah.
with that system. And,
Yeah, I've
uh,
been using the $5 approach of like giving them a bit of money every month just to try and help as much as I can at the moment. But also I find that Discord's been good also for setting up small communities on that, and then during the
yeah,
day when I'm doing stuff, I'm usually jumping in a voice channel and just chatting to people for a wee while and catching up and having a chat like this, for an hour while I'm doing something,
yeah,
going back to work. So,
yeah,
yeah, that's also been great. So, yeah, I think it hasn't really been figured out, but I feel like also the world is in this huge like shift, this whole change of not just with art, with like the whole world. It's not just tech in general is suffering, not just games. So like the whole tech industry is really on a downer, and people are. Well, we know what it's like in the UK right now with elections coming up, and how we're all feeling about that, and with the Tories and stuff,
yeah,
and even with
yeah,
America, with Biden and Trump again running, like and there's a lot of far right parties in places like France, Italy, and Germany, and Spain that are kind of taking the reins. So it's getting to a point like it was 100 years ago, where tensions are super high around the world. There's war everywhere. So it's just a weird time. I think that will hopefully at one point shift back to normality. But I
I think
think
it will. I
yeah,
think it will get better in terms of the arts. I think it will. I think people, as you say, people you don't realise what they've got until they've lost it.
yeah,
This is another fact of life, right? I think we're in so many things. Yeah, but when it's not there, and I think people will genuinely miss human artists, and
yes,
they'll want it back. And I think these things work are cyclical.
cycle, yeah,
I think once people get fed up with seeing Lord of the Rings in anime, or the latest thing, that just seems to be a really vapid idea,
yeah,
and that's got a shelf life. Everything has a shelf life, as we've
yes,
learned this. As we've learned this month, even Star Wars has a shelf life, right? It has a
yeah,
shelf life for everyone. Like, I mean, for me, the Star Wars died after Return of the Jedi, but
yeah,
everyone has a different opinion. Everyone has a different kind of, some people are going to remember the sequels more, like it, but everything has a shelf life,
Yep.
and I think AI has that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it'll then become a tool. It's not a tool at the moment. Don't believe people that say it's a tool at the moment. It's not.
They're a tool.
No, but it will be. It will.
Yeah.
I think it will be. That's my hope. Sort of staying positive.
It's the same with the AAA space as well. Like the amount of indie stuff now I'm seeing coming out where people are really turning their head to be like, oh my god, that's different. That's really, like stuff that, Xbox Showcase just happened recently. So, the new Doom was announced and this other game and stuff and whatever else. But honestly, a lot of it blew over my head where I was like, oh, really? I mean, credit to those companies and the games they're making, they're fantastic, obviously. And even obviously the Fable team, the guys down at Playgrounds who are making that, fantastic. The game's been going for a long, long time. Shout out Thomas Chamberlain Cain. But a lot of those guys make great stuff and it's fantastic. But now I'm seeking those smaller, really niche storytelling, story-driven games, like Spirit Father or like Gris or like other small stuff that even like stuff like Stardew Valley that I've missed for so long that I've never really tried. And just trying to pick up on these experiences that aren't huge and overblown. And it's the same in movies, the Marvel stuff is getting a wee bit tiring now. And, it's like a lot of this stuff, it's like, your life goes in trends where like that was the big thing for the longest time. It's like Michael Bay movies, you can only watch so many of them before you need to watch something else.
I think so. I think the problem with going back to Star Wars really is that they're kind of running out of ideas, and it, to me, it's clear. But then I don't know who their target audience is, to be honest. So, like for me, it's clear to me I am not their target audience, but that's not a bad thing. At the end of the day, it is what it is. It has, like I say, it has a shelf life.
Yeah.
With different people, so it's certainly interesting seeing how these things develop and how the natural ebb and flow of these creative projects. Because I think the creative teams on Star Wars stuff, like the newer stuff they've done, are fantastic. They've done the effects team, the makeup, all of that. It's really, really good.
Yeah,
it's just the stories for me just don't seem to hit the notes, and perhaps that's because I'm an old git that his two died in the wall, like that's the reality of it. But then I must be, there must be plenty of more people out there that are like me. So they need to, something will come along that ticks our box and will drag us away. And I think that's always happened, but I think it's now more visual because we've got lots of these like very segmented kind of franchises.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting at the moment because a lot of us are sitting, as you say, the Marvel licenses and DC, they're not kind of delivered. A lot of people would say, I'm not going to be opinionated on this because I have to work within that sphere, but a lot of people would say that they've lost touch with their prime audience. And so it's interesting. We're now, even in the collectibles industry, we're kind of sitting there twiddling our thumbs thinking, well, what's the next big thing going to be? Because we've done all this. We've done. There's only so many Batman statues people can buy at the end of the day, right? That's you would think we were past that point like a year ago, but people still buy them. But so there must be some. There's got to be something else. So it's quite actually, if you see it like that. It's quite an interesting time to be a creative.
Yeah, I think even like the things I'm seeing recently have been less the live action stuff, but a lot of animation, like adult animation, has really been taken over. Like I haven't watched it yet, but a lot of people have talked about Scavenger's Reign on Netflix and how incredible that series is, and how that's really like hitting the nerve of like the adult animation stuff. Because a lot of us grew up on that anime sense of like stuff like Ghost in the Shell and Akira back in the day. So I think there's a whole, like, especially like the guys I know at Powerhouse who worked on stuff like Castlevania. Like, if you've never seen the Castlevania series, I mean, the series in general is just
a little bit. It just I struggle with anime stuff. So
it's definitely
put the time in to get. I think that's the same with most of them. Is that you have to put the time in. So when I was working for Figurama, I worked on Rurouni Kenshin and Dororo. I watched those back to back. Because it was, and I actually got a love for anime from that. But of course,
Kenshin's incredible.
Akira, all those I had as a kid. But I've lost touch with it again. It's with.
Rediscovering adult animation as an adult is incredible. Like Kenshin, especially because Kenshin has a lot of live action movies that are really, really well done. Like the
That's right.
stunts
They're
and
very
the
creative looking.
stunts and the sword fighting are incredible. And like so there's a lot of that sense of like Powerhouse doing a lot of that kind of cool animation. And like there's a really good film that I watched recently called Nimona. Which is all about, it's based on a kid's book, but like that was really, really incredible as well. So like I think there's a whole sense of that being, and I think that's why Star Wars like kind of done so well with Ahsoka, because it was essentially season 8 of Star Wars, like the Clone Wars stuff, like so
Yeah,
it was like a
yeah,
continuation of Dave Filoni working on, like even Avatar. Like I mean, I've got Aang on my arm, I've got an Airbender on my arm, but like the fact that Airbender Studios, like talking with Jason Schreier recently of Paramount Pictures, he was like, the guys who work on Avatar are like literally across the road from me, and like I know their latest series is coming, like it's round the corner, it's 2025. So I think a lot of those worlds are going to be the things people dive back into. Animation seems to be coming up in a
yeah,
big way. So
yeah.
yeah,
I think there's especially within the statue industry, there's a heavy nostalgia element, and as we move our way through the generations,
well, X-Men
where it all
97, I
starts.
mean, that was huge on Disney Plus. Like so many people loved that reiteration of that coming back and being so well
Yeah,
done. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I think new things are going to come. I think we've gone through a stage of constant sequels with Hollywood, which is frustrating to me, being a child of the late 80s when all the good stuff happened, right? You got,
yeah,
so many cool films. And
mhm,
then you've got, and then it's sort of, it's kind of like we lack any of that imagination. Part
yeah,
of me feels like that's because we have so many avenues for creation
yeah,
that we kind of stifle ourselves.
yeah,
Whereas back then they had little to work with in terms of
yep.
special effects and stuff, so they came up with new. They were constantly forced to innovate.
Yes. I
Um,
mean,
and yeah,
Jason said that about Paramount. He was saying that the problem with Netflix and a lot of those companies is that unless it's a sequel or an existing IP, people just won't take a risk in it. But then he says
yeah,
when you look back at Lucas and George when he was like young and wanting to make stuff, he funded all his own stuff. He set up his own departments. He's filmed his own stuff. Like I mean, up until they were bought by Disney, Lucas was still the biggest independent film company in the US.
yeah,
And like people really need to start taking those risks. And what I've found with games that's coming to happen, and it might happen with films as well, is that because a lot of these bigger studios are being broken up again, and then they're scattering to the winds and making their own smaller studios, you'll find a lot of these IPs coming up now in the next 5 to 6 years where it's new ideas, it's new ways of doing stuff. So
I
yeah.
think, with the statue industry, of course, it's a very risky business because the margins are a bit, slimmer for
Mm-hmm.
statues and now for games
Yep.
and films. So we need, like, I do read sometimes online. They're like, well, a lot of the fans, because
Mm-hmm.
we're fans ourselves as well. So we'll get, but a lot of the fans would be like, well, I want a certain character. Why aren't they making it? Why aren't they, like, I really, really I'd buy that if they made it.
Yeah.
But and of course the kind of idea we get from it is that we're not doing it just out of spite. We're not
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
that character just to get on their nerves. Like,
Yeah.
no, we want to do those characters as much as you do, as
Yeah.
you want to see them. But the reality is that they're not commercially viable.
Yeah.
Or someone further up the chain has deemed them not commercially viable, that know more
Yeah.
about it than I do. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's that again is the commercial side of things
Mm-hmm.
that can be a difficult pill to swallow, and
Mm-hmm.
why we end up doing a load of Batman, because Batman sells. This
Yeah,
is the
else it does.
reality.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's like I think it's on the back of like the 3D printing revolution that we're in as well, and like I telling you about earlier on about the guy doing the life size Magneto. Like I know Dave and Todd have set up Revenger Studios where like I think they're trying to do something different as well, where like they're trying to make their own version of like a small, collectibles place. So
yeah,
you
I
might
think they're doing
find, yeah,
Frazetta stuff. Is that right? I think I saw some Frank Frazetta stuff that they were doing, which looked
yep.
amazing. Yeah.
So this is the thing: is like you might find a lot of these smaller people who then branch off for the bigger studios and make their own small thing and make statues that are one-offs or different stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, on that, I mean, on David, I know David did some stuff for Tweeterhead. He did the sort of the He-Man sort of stuff, which
Mhm,
I was at Monsterpalooza last year, and I
mhm,
saw they had Tweeterhead had a stand there, and those things looked amazing. They had some excellent sculptors
mhm.
working on them, and David's got that enthusiasm behind everything he does. Like and it rubs off on the product, I think. And it was great to see those, and something a little bit different from our childhood, because I remember collecting He-Man, when I was a kid. Just at that point in the it was like late 80s sort of thing where it was Transformers, Mask, and He-Man, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's nice to see something different like that. I know people collect Ninja Turtles as well. That was a bit after my time, but yeah, it's not. It was really interesting with XM working on the Transformers license.
Yeah.
And my last sculpt for them, which still needs to be released, was a Transformers sculpt. And I had the good fortune of art directing a couple of Transformers or three Transformers projects. So that was nice to be able to do something different outside of the dyed in the wool kind of
Yeah,
characters.
I mean, literally, when I was talking to Jason Shire a couple of weeks ago, he's just finishing up on Transformers One, which is the new movie that's coming out.
Oh
And
wow,
he
yeah,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So he was saying, obviously, and like, but he just came off working off Blue Eyed Samurai, which is interesting as well because that was something he did as a personal project, and then got hired by Netflix to then direct
I
as a
absolutely
production.
love that as well. And do you know what? Again, that's one of those things where I wouldn't bat an eyelid if someone asked me to do a statue of that. I think
Yeah,
it's fantastic. Like I'd love to do a statue of that. Perhaps someone's working on one already. I don't know, but I think those are the things that a lot of artists will be gravitating to more now,
yeah.
outside of the kind of dyed in the wool characters. Those
A
new
lot of this stuff,
exciting.
a lot of the stuff I've seen because Jason was talking about this because someone done a 3D version of the samurai for him, which I think was involved in the production. But he was
Right,
like, a lot of the stuff that ends up going to do stuff. Maybe they talk about like it was years ago, even like when somebody done a Raziel sculpt from Soul Reaver. Like I'm a huge Soul Reaver fan, huge Legacy Kane fan. The stuff I sculpted for fun in ZBrush was Raziel sculpts or Kane sculpts, and I know people who done stuff for that for like a nostalgia retrogasm thing, competition. Once they'd made it in ZBrush and it was coloured and all done, then a studio approached them being like, oh, by the way, we saw your sculpt. We should really turn that into a statue. Like, I feel like if you want to work on stuff like that and you want to make it a statue,
yes.
you just make it. And then somebody might just then approach you and
Yes.
have that
Well, going
conversation.
back to the Judge Anderson statue, I think, I think at the end of the day, that was something I wanted to do. It wasn't a commercial thing, I think, people will come to you. They will come to you. So
Mm,
let's go back to the Dishonored stuff I did. That I actually created so much interest in that. I never sold them because I always felt I was taking advantage of the license.
yeah, it's a
And
grey area, isn't it? Yeah.
it is. I don't look. I don't begrudge people doing fan art and selling it. That
Yeah.
you do you. Like I'm never going to
Mm,
judge people for that. But for
mm,
me, it didn't feel right.
mm.
But what it did give me is that it showed that I could sculpt something that was different from what everyone else was sculpting.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in that way, it was really 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 useful, and that was
Yeah.
nice because I got that affirmation that with I know I don't know at the moment because I think they've closed it down now. But in the Arcane Austin, they had like one of my 3D prints in the reception, which
Oh,
was
cool.
really really cool. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, it's just that little affirmation. So yeah, it gave me that little boost. So not everything has to be commercial.
Yeah.
If you just do something for fun, you'll be surprised at what comes back from it.
Yeah, I mean, like Arcane Austin has been shut down, but they didn't work specifically on Dishonored. I think they helped on the
Really
second
nice.
game. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, Arcane, the guys in Leon, I think, are the main studio, but they're working on the Blade game now for Marvel. So, which is awesome. I can't wait to play that. But like, yeah, so like the Dishonored stuff, I think it's one of these things that like even I think because you're talking like even when you done the little like the soldier guy with the gas mask thing and the blade, like and the amount of detail, and this was back in 2016, 2015. So I think seeing that level of detail on your sculpts then is something now people are aiming for in this generation of sculptors, but like you were already doing it like years back. So I think it's always great when you do these pieces because it gives you a chance to not only show your personal side, but also your flexibility and what you can do.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
yeah, fan art's always a good way to start with that stuff. Less so in the 2D realm, I think, because people don't want to see as much of that with design. But like if you're doing sculpting in general, fan art can work because as long as it's
I,
done well. Yeah.
I think with my I'm working on my new personal piece now
Mm,
after a 2-year break. I
mhm.
decided to take a break away from it and focus on learning, being part of the team and all of that. But
Yep.
I've got time now to do a bit of my own work. And
Mhm.
what I'm, I'm going back to my roots a little bit and trying to sculpt things that you wouldn't normally see sculpted in ZBrush. So, moving more towards abstraction, different themes, and I think that for me is where the fun is in that. Not that I don't have fun with Sideshow and XM.
No, but then you can only do so many superheroes before you start to get a bit stale in even that. So
yeah, but actually, I would say even that, Gordon, you have to find fun in those projects. If you don't, it's not worth it. So there is that. You have to kind of figure that. I would say all of the projects I work on, I have fun with. But again, I kind of learned how to step back and think, you're sculpting Batman. You shouldn't really be. You should have no problem. You should be enjoying it. Don't worry about it. And I think I try and have that attitude with everything. So I've done loads of different stuff. Like I worked for Critical Role as well on there.
I remember seeing that one. Yeah.
That wouldn't be something I would choose to do.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed that as well. That in itself was fun, and I'm proud of that line that we made. I think. But it's nice just to have fun without the commercial side weighing you down as well.
Yes.
And I think that's something where I'm moving more towards fine art than I am towards character art or any other thing within ZBrush, which is
you see that with Raph's latest stuff. I don't know if you saw his stuff from Monsterpalooza, the skull. Even the stuff he was doing in the NFT space way back, like the Angels and Demons stuff, like that was him, I think, looking back to that artistic side of himself versus like having worked on a video game for 5 years. I mean, like that was the break. He was then making stuff that was cool and different. So I think we all need to keep that part of our soul separate and nurture that. So anyway, I'm aware of the time also, James, because like you've got a life to get back to and things to do, I'm sure, but we can end it there. But essentially this has been a great conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting.
It's been fun. It's been fun to basically cut my day up a little bit. So we tend to. Well, when you're working abroad as well, of course, you've got the time differences as well. Yep. So a lot of the time I'll be working all day when everyone's asleep at the office, So it's nice to sort of have these little breaks and stuff. And, I think it's important we do that as artists as well. Like if you're at home, working constantly in a room, you need to get out and do things. And if it's other art, great. But if it's other hobby or whatever, that I think that's so important. And something I've tried kind of train myself to do as well. So it's nice to interact with other artists and like-minded people as well.
Right, man. So if you guys listening have made it to this point, thank you very much for staying on. It's definitely been one of the longer episodes as they usually are, but I'll try and put footnotes in, of course, so people can jump between. And again, I'll put all of James's links below so you can check out his work on different social media platforms. I think you're mostly active on Instagram, so I'll definitely include that. But also Karen, whatever else you're using. And if you want to reach out to James, I'm sure he's always happy to answer questions if you have them. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments down below and check us out on other social media platforms, including stuff like Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. Just to say thank you for you guys for listening to this point. Thanks for James for coming on and giving up his time.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.